The hidden pain of high intelligence, Schopenhauer explains, let me ask you something that most people never dare to consider. What if intelligence isn't a gift, but a burden? What if the very thing we admire, genius, deep thought, philosophical insight, is not the path to happiness, but the source of profound suffering? This is the terrifying possibility Arthur Schopenhauer confronts us with. And it flips everything we think we know about intelligence on its head. We live in a culture that worships intellect. We praise IQ, we idolize thinkers, we envy the smart. But what if being highly intelligent actually increases your sensitivity to pain, your awareness of life's absurdity, your alienation from others, and your sense of existential despair? Schopenhauer didn't romanticize intelligence. He dissected it. He saw it as a double-edged sword, something that allows us to see deeper into life's fabric, but also exposes us to truths that others are lucky to be blind to. Imagine walking through life with a heightened awareness of everything, every contradiction in human behavior, every false promise of happiness, that every noise in the background that others tune out. That's what Schopenhauer believed. The intelligent person lives with an unbearable clarity. And this clarity doesn't lead to peace. It leads to sorrow.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Why? Because intelligence increases consciousness, and consciousness is not a neutral state. The more conscious you are, the more you see clearly the inherent suffering in existence. The more you understand how brief, fragile, and often meaningless most of our experiences are. The average person can distract themselves. They can indulge in superficial pleasures, conform to collective illusions, and never question their place in the machinery of life. But the highly intelligent cannot do this so easily. They see through things, and what they see often haunts them. Schopenhauer famously said, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone." This wasn't a celebration of solitude, it was a reflection of the alienation that naturally arises when your intellect outpaces your environment. The intelligent person sees patterns that others miss, asks questions that others find annoying, and feels things more deeply than others can understand. And so they pull away, not out of arrogance but out of necessity, because they are too awake to be comfortable in a world that rewards sleep. But the pain goes deeper. It's not just social isolation. It's metaphysical. Schopenhauer believed that the world itself is the expression of a blind, irrational force, what he called the will, a kind of cosmic striving without purpose. And intelligence, tragically, doesn't liberate us from this will. It just lets us see it more clearly. To be intelligent, then, is to become fully aware of the futility of our striving. You know you are caught in a game you didn't choose, with rules you can't change, and an ending you can't avoid. You know that pleasure is temporary, that desire renews itself endlessly, and that death is inevitable. And here's the cruel twist: the more intelligent you are, the harder it is to lie to yourself about these truths. Do you feel it? That quiet dread beneath the surface? That eerie sense that maybe, just maybe, your intelligence doesn't make life more meaningful but more absurd? That's what Schopenhauer forces us to confront. And it's not just philosophy, it's psychology. Studies show that highly intelligent people are more prone to anxiety, depression, and existential rumination. They overthink. They see too many sides to every issue. They struggle to find like-minded people. They carry the weight of the world's contradictions on their shoulders, and often they carry it in silence. So here's the real question: if intelligence leads to suffering, why do we keep pursuing it? Why do we equate it with superiority, when it may in fact be a kind of curse? And if we are among the few who see too much, how do we live with that vision without going mad? Schopenhauer gives us no easy answers, but he does give us a path. A bleak path, perhaps, but a path nonetheless. And it starts by accepting the pain of intelligence not as a flaw, but as a natural consequence of perception. To be intelligent is to suffer more, yes, but also to understand more. And in that understanding there may be a deeper kind of peace. Not the peace of ignorance, but the peace of acceptance. The peace of no longer demanding that life be other than what it is. The loneliness of genius. Why the brightest minds feel the most alone. There's a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being physically isolated. It comes from being mentally distant from the people around you. It's the loneliness of being misunderstood, of speaking a language few others speak, of seeing layers in reality that others don't even notice. And if you've ever felt this trapped in your own head, surrounded by people yet disconnected, you're not broken. You're likely just aware in a way that most aren't. Schopenhauer understood this deeply. He saw that the more intelligent a person becomes, the more likely they are to suffer from profound, existential loneliness. You see, intelligence doesn't just allow us to solve problems, it amplifies our capacity for reflection, for observation, for noticing patterns in behavior and thought. And with that comes a heightened sensitivity to absurdity, hypocrisy, and the shallow nature of most conversations. When others are laughing at a joke, you might be dissecting the insecurity behind it. When others are excited about an event, you might be questioning the meaning of the event itself. You're not trying to be difficult. You're just wired differently, and that difference creates distance. Not because you want it to, but because depth, by nature, separates. Schopenhauer didn't believe that intelligent people were better than others, just that they were tragically misaligned with the world. He wrote that the more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him. And this is precisely the problem. When your mind is constantly probing the mystery of existence, you can't settle into the simple comforts that others find fulfilling. You're asking questions no one wants to ask. You're seeing behind the curtain, and once you've seen behind the curtain, it becomes almost impossible to return to the play. Now, this disconnection breeds loneliness. But not just any loneliness, a kind that's hard to even speak about. Because how do you explain to someone that you feel alone, not because no one is around, but because no one seems to exist in the same mental space? How do you describe the experience of sitting in a room of people and still feeling like a ghost? You can't. So you withdraw. You protect your inner world. You become quiet not out of shyness, but out of exhaustion. Conversation becomes tedious. Small talk becomes unbearable. And people begin to label you aloof, arrogant, antisocial. But they don't see the real story. They don't see that you're not running from connection, you're just starving for depth. But this is where the pain sharpens. Because deep down, we all crave connection. Even the most introverted among us long to be seen, to be understood. But when your mind functions at a high level, that kind of connection becomes rare. It's not that you're unwilling to connect, it's that the bandwidth of most interactions is too narrow to carry the weight of your thoughts. And so, Like Schopenhauer, many intelligent people retreat into solitude, not because they want to be alone, but because solitude becomes the only space where their minds can breathe freely. But is this loneliness inevitable? Does intelligence doom us to isolation? That's the haunting question, and Schopenhauer, in his grim yet lucid way, suggests that yes, it kind of does. But he also offers a strange form of comfort. He suggests that once we understand this loneliness as natural, as a consequence of depth rather than a failure of personality, we can stop resisting it. We can begin to make peace with it. In fact, he believed that solitude was not just necessary for the intelligent person, but essential. Because in solitude, we are no longer forced to dilute ourselves. We can think freely, read deeply, create meaningfully. We can stop playing roles and start living honestly. This is why so many thinkers, artists, and philosophers throughout history have embraced solitude. Not because they hated people, but because they couldn't find themselves in the noise. And maybe that's the path forward, not to escape loneliness, but to transform it, and to turn solitude into sanctuary, to stop expecting others to fill our inner world and instead begin to cultivate it ourselves. So let me ask you something that very few people dare to ask themselves. Are you lonely because you're alone, or are you lonely because the world feels too small for your thoughts? And if it's the latter, what if your loneliness isn't a weakness, but a sign that your mind is touching something most people never even sense? The curse of awareness, how seeing too much breaks the spirit. There is a hidden cost to awareness that almost no one talks about. We tend to romanticize consciousness, to treat awareness like a superpower, something that makes us more evolved, more enlightened, more adult. But Schopenhauer warns us, the gift of awareness is also a curse. Because once you truly see the structure of life beneath the surface, you can't unsee it. And more importantly, you can't feel the same way ever again. The illusion is gone. The comfort of ignorance is shattered. And in its place is a kind of existential vertigo, a deep spiritual fatigue that no amount of pleasure or distraction can erase. This is the condition of the hyper-aware. You start to notice everything, not just the obvious injustices or the contradictions in society, but the subtle, quiet truths that slip past most people unnoticed. You see the way people lie to themselves just to get through the day. You catch the emptiness behind people's laughter, the desperation behind their ambition. You recognize how most of the things we chase, money, fame, validation, are just elaborate distractions from a deeper void. You see how time devours everything. And you begin to feel it all the time, everywhere, in conversations, in silence, in success, in failure. Schopenhauer believed that this heightened awareness was not just a mental state, but a spiritual burden. To him, the world was fundamentally irrational, a chaotic manifestation of the blind, insatiable will. And the more conscious you become, the more you realize how powerless you are within it. You can't reason with the will. You can't negotiate with it. You can only observe and ache. Awareness becomes a kind of torment. You see the suffering, you understand its inevitability, and yet you can do nothing to stop it. You walk through life like someone who's read the last page of the book and now has to keep reading anyway. This is not depression in the clinical sense, it's metaphysical despair. It's not just that life feels painful, it's that you understand why it must be painful. You grasp the machinery beneath the illusion, and that knowledge doesn't comfort you, it crushes you. You see the futile repetition of desire, the cycle of striving and disappointment, the way even the most beautiful moments are tainted by their impermanence. And this vision doesn't make you feel wise. It makes you feel hollow. So what do you do with all this awareness? That's the real question. Because you can't unknow what you know. You can't plug yourself back into the matrix. You can't pretend that the illusions are real again. And most people don't understand this. They tell you to think positive, to be grateful, to look on the bright side. But they don't see what you see. They don't feel what you feel. And so their advice, however well-intentioned, feels like a slap in the face. Because they're asking you to ignore truth for the sake of comfort. And you've already been down that road. You know where it leads. Schopenhauer's answer was radical. If awareness leads to suffering, then the only path to peace is detachment. Not detachment in the cold, nihilistic sense, but in the spiritual, Buddhist sense. To let go of the will, to stop striving, to stop grasping, to stop demanding that life give you something it never promised. He believed that by withdrawing from worldly concerns through art, philosophy, and ascetic living, we could dull the sting of awareness. We could step back from the chaos and observe it, like a storm we're no longer caught in. But make no mistake, this path isn't easy. It requires a kind of inner revolution. You have to let go of the very things you were taught to pursue. You have to give up the chase. And that's terrifying. Because for most of us, our identity is built around the chase. But if you can do it, if you can truly detach, then a strange thing happens. The pain doesn't vanish, but it becomes bearable. And in that space, in that stillness, a deeper kind of peace begins to emerge. So I'll ask you something most people never dare to confront. What if the pain you feel isn't a flaw, but a sign that you're awake in a world designed for sleep? And if that's true, can you find the strength to stay awake even when it hurts? Peace without illusions. How to live with the weight of a brilliant mind. If you've made it this far, you already know that intelligence, true, piercing, existential intelligence, is not a ticket to happiness. It's not a shortcut to peace or a guarantee of success. It's a weight, a responsibility, a lens that lets you see the world not as you wish it to be, but as it is. And once you begin to see clearly, you can never go back. So the real challenge is not how to escape the weight of a brilliant mind, but how to carry it, how to live with it, how to find peace, not through illusion, but in spite of truth. Schopenhauer didn't believe in fairy tales. He didn't sugarcoat reality. He saw life as suffering a wheel of endless striving, driven by the blind will. Yet he wasn't a nihilist. He didn't say, give up. He said something far more powerful, detach. Not from life itself, but from your expectations of what life is supposed to provide. Stop demanding that the world entertain you, fulfill you, reward you. Stop insisting that your intelligence entitle you to happiness. It doesn't. Your mind is not a gift meant for comfort. It's a tool for seeing, for understanding, for transcending. And that's where the possibility of peace begins, not in changing the world, but in changing how you relate to it. You don't have to believe the lies others live by, but you also don't have to fight them. You don't have to disconnect from everyone, but you also don't need to dilute yourself to fit in. You can walk through the world like a diver moving through deep waters, aware, calm, observant, not trying to fix everything, not trying to numb everything, just being. That's the paradox Schopenhauer leads us to. It is precisely by surrendering our resistance to suffering that we begin to suffer less. So what does this look like in practice? It means you stop chasing. You stop trying to extract permanent happiness from things that were never built to last. You recognize that the highs of life's success, pleasure, recognition are fleeting, and you stop hinging your identity on them. You begin to cultivate what Schopenhauer called contemplation, the quiet, inward-facing life. Reading, writing, creating, observing the world with curiosity, not judgment. Finding beauty in the tragic, the broken, the impermanent. You begin to see suffering not just as something to endure, but as something that teaches, sharpens, humbles. And maybe most importantly, you stop blaming yourself for feeling too much. You stop pathologizing your depth. There's nothing wrong with you because you're sensitive to the absurdity of life. There's nothing broken about your mind because it refuses to accept shallow answers. You're not malfunctioning, you're awake. And yes, being awake hurts. But it also opens the door to something far more powerful than comfort, integrity. The ability to live in alignment with what you know, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. This is where the real transformation happens. When you stop expecting peace to come from outside, from people, from achievements, from distractions, and you begin to build it from within. You learn to sit with your thoughts, not run from them. You learn to observe your suffering, not exaggerate it. You learn to stop resisting what is and start asking, what can I create with what I've been given? Because in the end, what you do with your intelligence is what defines you, not how much it hurts. So let me leave you with one last question, maybe the most important of all. If you were never promised happiness, but given the gift of deep awareness, what would you do with it? Would you waste it trying to numb the pain? Or would you use it to build something beautiful, even if no one else understands it? Because maybe that's what it means to live with a brilliant mind, not to escape the weight, but to carry it with grace. And in that grace, to find your own kind of peace, not in illusions, but in truth. If this video sparks something in you, don't just like or comment. Reflect. Share it with someone who feels too much, thinks too much, sees too much, and let them know they're not alone.